He didn't speak. He didn't blink. A white man in a deputy badge had his fingers locked around Bumpy Johnson's wife's arm, dragging her backwards until the entire street froze mid-dash step. It happened just after 2 in the afternoon. Sunlight hung still above 139th and Lenox, casting long shadows from the awnings and fruit crates lining the storefronts. It was a quiet day, too quiet, almost as if Harlem itself was holding a breath it hadn't meant to take. Miss Mame Johnson, elegant as ever in her powder blue coat and gloved hands, stepped out of Lillian's millinery with nothing but a small box in her palm, a new hat for Sunday. She moved with grace, always with grace. That's how she was raised. That's how she walked. And Harlem noticed, which is why everyone noticed when the sound of leather boots scraped too. Fast behind her Deputy Royce Killen, white, broad in the shoulders. His badge half tilted like he wore it for show, not for law. He wasn't NYPD. He was seconded from upstate, part of some backdoor enforcement experiment involving narcotics and Harlem's cleanup. Everyone knew what that meant. Southborn, clan-backed, unchecked. He called out something crude. No one remembers the exact words. What people remember is what followed. Mame turned. She didn't flinch. She didn't bow her head. And that was enough. His hand snatched her by the arm tight above the elbow. Hard enough for the little white hat box to fall to the pavement with a soft crack. The street didn't yell. The street didn't scream. It went silent. A woman near the newsstand gasped, but it caught in her throat. The fruit seller just blinked. Children paused in mid-laughter. The church lady, 2 stoops down, froze in place, her Bible pressed against her chest. Time stopped, because Mame Johnson wasn't just a woman in Harlem. She was Bumpy's wife, the man who had fed families in famine, the man who had shut down a corrupt vice raid with 1 phone call, the man who had walked out of Sing Sing, untouched because the guards were scared of what would happen outside the walls if they laid a finger on him. But this deputy, he didn't know. Or worse, he didn't care. Mame looked at the grip around her arm, then up at the man's face. She said nothing. She didn't plead. She didn't struggle. She just held his eyes, calm and deadly. He sneered. Didn't your kind learn to answer when spoken to? And just then, a door opened. It was barely audible, just the soft jingle of a shop bell behind the butcher's, but when he stepped out, everything changed. Bumpy Johnson, 3-piece charcoal suit. No hat, no overcoat. No entourage. Just presence. His eyes scanned the sidewalk. Not rushed, not wide, just registering. He looked at the hat box on the ground, then at Mame's arm, then at the deputy's hand. He didn't raise his voice. The deputy turned, still holding Mame. What? Bumpy's head tilted just slightly, like a man correcting posture at a chessboard. I said. His voice wasn't louder the second time. Let her go. Royce Killen snorted. This your girl? Bumpy didn't answer. The deputy smiled, a little crooked, maybe unsure. You think I give a damn what she is to you? No response. That was his mistake, because the moment that laugh left his throat, something behind him moved. Not Bumpy, not a bodyguard. The street. A shoe scraped behind the newsstand. A vendor's wristwatch caught the sun as it twisted toward the scene. A little girl clutched her mother's leg. Royce Killen looked around. And for the first time, he saw. Every eye was on him. Not angry. Not frightened. Just waiting. A power that didn't need to shout. Didn't need a badge. Didn't need permission. This wasn't fear of a man. This was fear of what happens when respect is broken. And he let go. The arm dropped. Mame straightened her coat, picked up the box, didn't say a word. She stepped past her husband like nothing had happened, and he followed, slow, unhurried. Not even a glance back. The deputy stood frozen, mouth open, one hand half raised, unsure whether to reach for his weapon or wipe the tea. Sweat now glistening on his upper lip. The crowd didn't cheer. The crowd didn't whisper. They just let the silence sit. A warning, a witness. A contract renewed. By sundown, the story had already spread door to door, corner to corner, whispered like scripture between barbers and bartenders. No need for newspapers. No need for telephones. Harlem knew. And Harlem waited, but not for noise. Not for war. They waited for Bumpy, because retaliation wasn't a question. The only question was how and when. Bumpy Johnson didn't return home right away. After the street incident, after Mame's coat was smoothed and her arm tucked gently into his, Bumpy had walked her to the car, opened the door, kissed her hand, like he always did, and let her drive herself back. Then he vanished out. No one saw him eat. No one saw him light a cigar. No one heard him call his men, because Bumpy Johnson didn't believe in explosions. He believed in equations, and Harlem knew that. When something broke, the wrong men would strike fast. They'd shout, threaten, kick doors in. They needed the noise to feel powerful. But Bumpy would go quiet. And that's when Harlem listened harder. In the hours that followed, the neighborhood did what it always did in moments like this. It watched itself. The shoeshine boy on 145th didn't just polish boots. He tracked who crossed the block twice. The florist on Frederick Douglass Boulevard pulled her cart slightly forward, giving cover to an alley she knew might be used later. And in the brownstones, curtains moved like breathing lungs, rhythmic, alive. People didn't run, didn't hide. But their steps shifted, slower, eyes more alert. Bumpy didn't ask Harlem to protect him. Harlem offered, because what the deputy grabbed wasn't just a woman. He grabbed Harlem's terms. Inside a small back room near 125th, Bumpy sat alone. No desk, no lieutenants. Just one chair, a lamp, and the same suit he'd worn that afternoon. Silence was his weapon. The stillness, his map. He wasn't thinking about Royce Killen's badge. He was thinking about the message, because every act like this, every public humiliation, wasn't just a moment. It was a test balloon. They were testing how far they could go. Not just with him, but with the entire neighborhood. Deputies like Killen weren't sent into Harlem to police. They were sent to push Dot, and if no one pushed back, then next time it wouldn't be a grip on an arm. It'd be a raid, a beating, a dead boy in an alley, a closed funeral. So Bumpy's retaliation wouldn't be revenge. It would be geometry. Measured, angled, designed to send a ripple back through the system that sent Killen in the first place. At a pool hall on Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard. Whispers passed faster than cues across felt. You think he's gonna burn him? No, that's not Bumpy's way. Then what? Silence. Because Bumpy never repeated the same move twice. That's what made him terrifying. He wasn't emotional. He was strategic. And when he didn't move, people paid even closer attention. By nightfall, Killen had gone home, a few drinks in, laughing. He told two other off-duty cops that some spook prince tried to scare him on the sidewalk. He poured himself whiskey, boasted about her skin, called it velvet from a mule. That's when the cold came. Not outside. Inside. The kind that creeps under a door frame. The kind that makes a man turn down the music for no reason. He checked the blinds. Nothing. But something in him shifted, because bullies don't fear fists. They fear consequences that don't announce themselves. And somewhere inside his arrogance, a seed had been planted by a man who didn't raise his voice. Meanwhile, back in Harlem, the barbershop stayed open an hour past close. Not for haircuts, for messages. Bumpy had a way of using normal places for unspoken plans. No orders barked. No money passed. Just one phrase repeated, "Tell the block." No heat, not yet. It moved like current. Every ear knew, stand down. Do nothing until the boss moved. That wasn't control by fear. That was respect built over years of doing the one thing no other man in Harlem could do: protect without collapsing. The community dot by midnight, the lights were out at the brownstone. Bumpy stood at the window. Mame had said little. She never needed to. The look in her eyes was trust not in his rage, but in his patience, and she knew the pattern. She knew what came next. Wouldn't be loud, but it would last, because Bumpy didn't want Killin to hurt. He wanted Killin to understand. He wanted every man who wore that badge and thought it made him untouchable to think twice next time. He wanted the system to learn, not bleed, because blood dries, but fear stays in the bone. Royce Killin didn't wear a uniform to uphold law. He wore it because it gave him permission. Back home in Greene County, the badge had been passed down like a rifle or a family name. His uncle was sheriff. His father ran freight through back roads known for black labor and white whispers. As a boy, Royce used to ride along smiling as black workers were pulled from trucks, slapped across the mouth, told to watch their tone. That grin had never left his face. Not when he joined the State Narcotics Task Force. Not when he got loaned to New York on a Harlem initiative nobody in Harlem had asked for, and especially not when he was told his new patrol was 138th to 145th, Lenox to St. Nicholas. That grin stayed. Because men like Royce didn't just carry power. They fed on the idea that others couldn't touch it. In the months before the incident with Mame, Deputy Killin had already left his mark on the block. He raided a record shop and pistol whipped the owner in the back room, claimed he smelled reefer. He stopped black boys on bicycles and pushed them against walls. Routine checks. He lingered outside the beauty salon too long, brushing his fingers against door frames, looking women up and down without blinking. Nobody could prove a thing, because the badge made him invincible. And for men like that, invincibility wasn't a shield. It was appetite. People reported him. One mother walked her complaint straight to the 28th precinct, only to be told there were no verified incidents. Another man, a deacon, brought a list of names: businesses harassed, workers shoved, stores extorted. The sergeant skimmed it, folded it in half. Said, "You'll need more than stories. You want proof." But Harlem knew the truth. Royce wasn't a mistake. He was sent. The city was nervous. Bumpy's quiet hold on the neighborhood had made headlines in too many white papers. Editors started using words like shadow governance. Senators whispered about colored fiefdoms. Wealthy developers wanted Harlem softened for the pedophile next generation. So they sent a weapon without a leash and gave him a badge. But power has a flaw. It talks too much. And Royce talked in bars, in squad cars, on his front porch with his sleeves rolled up. He'd say things like, "Bumpy's just a myth. An asterisk 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 in a suit. Y'all too scared to test a man with a badge. I ain't. He look at me wrong, I'll put him in the ground. Wife too." He said it to fellow deputies, to bouncers, to a woman in a slip who eventually told her brother, who told a numbers runner, who told a man Bumpy trusted. None of those stories were brought to Bumpy, because Bumpy already knew he didn't need dossiers. He didn't need recordings. He had Harlem's ears, and he trusted them more than any court. So when Killin grabbed Mame, it wasn't random. It was an escalation, the final test, a message. I can touch what's yours, and you'll do nothing. Because Royce believed Harlem was still the same Harlem of 10 years ago, fragmented, desperate, scared. But what he failed to see was what Bumpy had built. Not an army, not a gang, a contract, unspoken, unwritten, stronger than any law, a contract. Between a man and a people, I protect you. You protect the line. And the line had just been crossed. Back at the precinct, the other officers began to feel it. Not officially, but in the air, phones that used to buzz stopped ringing. Informants dried up. Bartenders got quiet when blue uniforms entered. One officer joked, "Did we lose the city this week?" Another laughed until he noticed nobody else joined him, because while no headline had dropped, something was happening. The streets didn't need sirens to signal change. They needed only a silence that moved. Royce Killen didn't notice. He was too busy puffing his chest at precinct roll call, too busy bragging to a new recruit that he checked Harlem's top man and walked away without a scratch. He wasn't scared, but he wasn't listening either. He didn't notice the shift in tone. When he entered a diner, he didn't see the busboy whisper into the kitchen after pouring his coffee. He didn't question why the kitchen, why the Nazama. Streetlight outside his apartment flickered out for the first time in 2 years. What he did notice too late was the distance. The invisible space people began to give him. The eyes that no longer looked away from his face, but through it. The laughter that didn't pause when he passed by because they wanted him to hear it. And that's when it started. The itch. That feeling you can't place. A shadow you think you saw, but maybe didn't. The sound of a car engine idling too long near your home. He started locking the door twice, started leaving the radio on, started sleeping with his boots near the bed, but he never admitted it, because men like Royce don't acknowledge fear, they just feel it. In the ribs first, then in the back of the throat, then in the sweat that won't stop. Even in air conditioning, Bumpy never sent a warning, never uttered a threat. He didn't need to, because the weight of Harlem had already shifted. The streets that used to make Royce feel big now felt like they were watching him, and no badge in. The world could block 1,000 quiet eyes. It was just after 2:30 in the morning when the lights cut out on 141st Street. No thunder, no police chatter. Just a flick like God took a breath and Harlem held its own. 3 black Buicks, windows dark, engines quiet, turned off Lennox and rolled slow like fog with wheels. They didn't park. They settled. Soft rubber against curb, headlights dead. Doors didn't slam. They clicked. No one stepped out wearing a mask. No one needed to. These weren't kids with pistols. These weren't thugs with grudges. These were quiet men with instructions. Royce Killen lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up, above a pawn shop, unlisted, the kind of address a man chooses when he thinks no one will ever care enough to find it. But Bumpy didn't find people with paperwork. He found them through loyalty trails, who you drink with, who you insult, who you owe. Every man leaves footprints when they move like they own something, and Royce had dragged his across Harlem's pride. So now they were here, and there were no sirens, because this wasn't about police. This was about rules. The first lock popped like it had been waiting. The second barely made a sound. The man in front, broad-shouldered, no hat, no gloves, turned the knob slowly. They didn't kick the door. They opened it like it was theirs, because tonight it was. Royce was asleep, shirtless, face slack against a pillow soaked in bourbon breath and entitlement. He didn't hear them enter, didn't smell the shift in the air, didn't know 3 figures now stood inside his hallway, shadows taller than the doorframe. The 4th man stayed outside, not to keep watch. To ensure silence stayed sealed. The man who stepped forward wasn't Bumpy, but his shoes were shined the same way. He didn't carry a gun, just a cloth. Black, thick, folded 3 times. He laid it gently on the nightstand beside the deputy's pistol. And then he spoke. Not loud. Not harsh. Just clear. Wake up. Royce blinked. And the next moment, everything changed. There are 2 kinds of fear. One is reaction. The other is recognition. And what Royce saw in those eyes was the second he sat up, reached for the pistol. Didn't find it. His hand shook. The man nodded to the others. A cord came out. Hands were tied. Not cruel, but tight. A second passed. Then a third. Nobody raised their voice. Royce started shouting, then sobbing, then both. But no neighbors woke because the street outside had agreed to sleep through this. They didn't beat him. They didn't bruise his face. They didn't need to. Instead, the man reached into a coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was maimed in her powder blue coat, gloved hands, holding the crushed white hat box. The man held it up. Then, calmly, placed it in Royce's lap. A second photo followed. It was of Bumpy, just his silhouette, standing in front of Killen's building the night before. Looking up. Time-stamp. Royce single quotes S mouth opened, but no sound came out, because this wasn't revenge. It was proof that his life could have ended yesterday. Proof that they waited. Proof that he was the mercy, not the victim. Then came the final item, a slip of paper, not a threat, just a list. 8 names of men who'd laughed at Royce's stories, who called him reckless but useful, who shared whiskey with him in the backlot after shift. Every one of them. Underlined, and one sentence at the bottom, your silence is how they live. That's all. They untied him. No blood. No bruises. Just a man left sitting on his own bed, in wet sheets, holding 3 pieces of paper that now owned his soul. The men left the way they came. No noise. No trace. But before the door shut, one paused. He looked back, not with hate, not even with threat, just that same silence that had waited on 139th Street. And Royce understood. He wasn't in control. Not here. Not anymore. By dawn, he was gone. No note. No badge turned in. Just a man who used to swagger, now vanished like smoke before light. And the only ones who noticed were the ones who knew what silence meant. Morning in Harlem doesn't start with alarm clocks. It starts with rhythm broom bristles on brownstone steps, gospel from second-floor radios, kids bouncing balls off curbs, vendors shouting prices through steam from early food carts. But not this morning. Not on this street. 141 SD in Lenox. Went silent. Not empty, silent. The fruit man still unpacked crates. The baker still flipped the sign to open. A boy still tied his shoelaces on the stoop, but something was missing. Reaction. Because Royce Killen had returned. He stepped onto the sidewalk at 8:02 a.m. Same way he always had. Boots laced tight, shirt tucked, badge clipped to his belt like a medal. Same haircut. Same swagger, but something had shifted in his eyes. Not confidence. Calculation. Like a man watching his own reflection walk beside him, waiting to see who blinked first. He crossed the street near the florist. She usually smiled. Today, she adjusted her display without looking up. The newsstand man didn't nod. The barbershop door stayed shut. 2 kids tossing a rubber ball stopped mid-play, not to stare, but to ignore. That was the difference. No one yelled. No one cursed. No one spit. They just didn't see him, and that, in Harlem, meant exile. Royce walked another block. At first, he thought it was coincidence. Then he passed a cafe. 3 men at a table. One looked up, then down. The other 2 didn't flinch. He stepped closer. Their conversation continued loud enough for him to hear. Wasn't no accident. He walked in like he owned the place. Funny how quick a man changes when he sees who really owns the silence. Royce stopped. They didn't. They weren't even talking to him. They were talking through him, and that broke something inside his chest. He turned down the alley near the old record store, tried to light a cigarette, hand shaking. The match wouldn't strike, because in his gut, something had started to rot, and the smell was recognition. He wasn't feared. He wasn't respected. He was finished, not by force, but by Absence. That's the thing about power in Harlem. It's not taken with fists. It's taken with space. When a man walks into a room and the air doesn't shift, when no one bothers to warn you, when the street you once ruled forgets your name, that's real death, and Royce felt it now. Across the boulevard, Bumpy watched from a parked car. Didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't move, just watched. This wasn't vengeance. This was balance. Royce would breathe. He would wake up each morning, but he would never walk. Harlem the same way again, because the silence would follow. A silence that said, "We saw what you did. We know what you are. We remember." And worse than fear was being nothing. Inside the butcher's, Mame stood at the counter. She wore the same coat, powder blue, her wrist, now healed. A soft bruise had bloomed and faded, but the message had rooted. The butcher asked if she wanted her usual. She nodded. He smiled. Because she wasn't just a customer. She was the woman who walked away from a predator. Untouched. She was Mrs. Johnson. Royce left Harlem 2 weeks later. No announcement. No transfer file. No patrol car packed. Just gone. Some say he took a bus out of town. Others say he called in favors from upstate and vanished into some backwoods post where no one knew the name Bumpy Johnson. Doesn't matter, because even in whatever town he landed, the silence probably followed. And Harlem? Harlem healed the way it always had, not by forgetting, but by remembering together. Every old man playing checkers, every mother walking a child across a crosswalk, every teenager watching from a stoop, learning not from headlines, but from how power corrects itself when it grows too bold. And they remembered that it wasn't the gun. It wasn't the punch. It wasn't the shout. It was the stillness. It was the look on Bumpy's face that day. It was the way Harlem stood behind him. By doing nothing at all. Because when community moves in silence, even the boldest badge can hear it echo. There's a kind of quiet that stays long after the street wakes up again, long after vendors shout prices and kids resume their games, long after church bells ring and radios hum and Harlem, in all its noise, moves forward like it always does. But beneath it all, some things don't return. Not fully, not the way they were. Weeks passed. Royce Killen's name vanished from the patrol logs. No. Officers asked where he'd gone. No statements were made, because when a man like that disappears quietly, it's not an accident. It's an understanding. Even the badge knows when to look the other way. Mame returned to her walks. Powder blue, coat folded away now, replaced with a darker one, sleek, elegant, just as sharp. Her stride didn't change, still poised, still silent. But people looked a little longer. Now. Not in pity. Not in fear. In respect, because she had become part of a larger truth. A chapter in a book Harlem would never write, but would never stop telling. Bumpy never spoke of it. Not to his men. Not to the street. Not even to Mame. There was no story to retell. The lesson had been delivered. Not just to Royce. To anyone watching, anyone waiting. Anyone who thought the man in the suit had grown soft with age, or lazy with comfort, they saw now, the suit was armor. And the silence? A sword. In the months that followed, something strange began to happen. Police patrols stayed farther from certain blocks. Random searches dropped by half. The newspapers stopped running. Anonymous Harlem corruption op-eds that smelled of backroom political whispers. Even the state task force shifted its focus, quietly reassigning problematic deputies to regions farther upstate. No announcement. No press conference. Just slow recalibration. Because when a community speaks, without speaking it echoes. And the ones listening? They got the message. Asterisk. One evening, Bumpy sat alone at a chess table in the park. The sun had dipped behind the brick skyline. Harlem glowed gold, just for a moment. Before the blue of night settled in. An old man walked past, gray beard, cane tapping concrete, eyes Sharp dot he stopped, nodded once, said nothing, and kept walking. That was how Harlem said thank you. Not with applause dot, not with flowers dot, with witness dot, with memory dot at Sylvia's. A group of young men huddled over sweet tea and fried fish, arguing about how to hold the line when cornered dot. One said you shout dot, another said you shoot. A third, barely 20, shook his head. No, he said. You go quiet, you let 'em feel it. They all turned. Where'd you hear that? He smiled, didn't answer, just raised his glass, because the legend was never about the act dot, it was about the principle. Years later, when men would speak of Harlem's most dangerous moment, not loud, not chaotic, but still, focused, absolute, they would point to that day dot, the day when a man grabbed what wasn't his, and the whole street answered, by doing nothing at all. That kind of unity doesn't get written down dot, it gets lived dot, it becomes muscle memory, passed from father to son, from stoop to stoop dot. And as for Bumpy, he just kept walking, suit pressed dot, steps clean, hands behind his back. He never once mentioned Killen's name, because some men don't deserve to be remembered. What matters isn't the man who came to test the line. What matters is the line held. Bumpy Johnson didn't win Harlem by war. He won it by understanding the weight of silence, and he taught the block the most dangerous lesson of all, that true power doesn't need to raise its voice.